The colony of New Geneva was beautiful in the morning light. 3 million people lived there, spread across green valleys and gentle hills. They had come from Earth 2 generations ago, seeking a quiet life among the stars. Farmers worked their fields. Children ran to school. Scientists studied the alien plants that grew in the purple forests. It was a peaceful world, and the people who lived there wanted nothing more than to raise their families and watch their crops grow. Admiral had visited New Geneva only once, 5 years ago. She remembered the smell of fresh bread from the bakeries in the capital city. She remembered her daughter laughing as her granddaughter chased butterflies through a meadow. Was 7 years old now. She wanted to be a pilot when she grew up, just like her grandmother. They arrived without warning. They came from a civilization older than human memory. For 8,000 years, the Dominion had ruled 40 star systems. They were tall creatures with silver skin and 4 arms, and they believed themselves to be the true masters of the galaxy. When humanity began spreading across the stars, they watched with growing anger. These humans bred too fast. They built too quickly. They did not know their place. The High of them made a decision. He would teach humanity a lesson they would never forget. 12 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel above New Geneva. The colony had only 2 small defense stations meant to stop pirates and asteroids. They lasted 4 minutes against the weapons. The planetary governor sent out a distress call, but they jammed all signals. No one would hear. No one would come. The bombardment began at sunrise. Massive energy beams struck the surface, turning cities into glass. Biological weapons fell from the sky, killing everything they touched. They were thorough. They were professional. They moved from continent to continent, making sure nothing survived. In the capital city, a young teacher gathered her students in a basement and told them stories to keep them calm. The building above them melted, and the basement became their grave. In the northern farmlands, a family tried to reach their emergency shelter. They never made it. In a small hospital, doctors worked until the very end, saving who they could, knowing it would not matter. 7 hours. That was how long it took to kill 3 million people. When they finished, they left behind a single beacon. It floated in orbit above the dead world, broadcasting a message in 17 different languages. The message was simple: humanity will learn its place. 3 weeks later, a supply convoy from Earth arrived at 442b. Captain James commanded the lead ship. He was bringing medicine and equipment for the colony hospital. His sister worked there as a nurse. He had brought gifts for her children. The convoy dropped out of FTL expecting to see a blue and green world full of life. Instead, they found ash. Captain stared at them for a long time. The planet below was brown and gray. No clouds moved across its surface. No lights shone from its cities at night. The oceans had boiled away in many places. Where forests had stood, there was only blackened earth. His scanners searched for life signs. They found nothing. Not a single heartbeat. Not a single breath. His communications officer found the beacon and played its message. The bridge crew listened in silence. Some of them cried. Some of them screamed. Captain did neither. He simply ordered his crew to record everything, to document every detail of what had been done. Then he set course for Earth. The news reached Admiral while she was reviewing fleet exercises near Jupiter. A young officer handed her a data pad with a trembling hand. She read the report once, then again, then a third time because her mind refused to accept what her eyes were seeing. New Geneva was gone. Her daughter was gone. Her granddaughter was gone. 3 million people erased from existence because an alien empire decided they were inconvenient. Admiral was 63 years old. She had served in the Terran Navy for 40 years. She had fought pirates and stopped rebellions. She had shaken hands with aliens and negotiated treaties. She had always believed that the galaxy was a place where reasonable beings could find common ground. She had always believed that war was a failure of imagination, that violence was a last resort for those who lacked the wisdom to find another way. Standing on her bridge, looking at the images of a dead world, She felt those beliefs crumble into dust. Other officers gathered around her, waiting for orders. They expected her to speak, to lead, to tell them what to do. But Admiral had no words. There were no words for this. There was no protocol, no training. Nothing in her 40 years of service had prepared her for the simple, terrible reality of genocide. She thought of chasing butterflies. She thought of the sound of her laughter. She thought of the last message she had received from her daughter 3 months ago, complaining about the weather and asking when grandmother would visit again. She would never visit again. There was nothing left to visit. The young officer who had brought her the report was still standing nearby. His face was pale. He had a daughter too, Admiral remembered, a little girl about's age. "Admiral," he said quietly, "what do we do?" Admiral looked at him. Then she looked at the images on the dead cities, the empty oceans, the silence where 3 million voices had once lived and laughed and dreamed. She thought about what they had done. She thought about what they would do again if no one stopped them. She thought about all the human colonies scattered across the stars, full of farmers and teachers and doctors and children, full of little girls who wanted to be pilots. The believed humanity was weak. They believed they could kill without consequence. They believed they were untouchable. Admiral deleted the last picture of her granddaughter from her personal files. She could not afford to look at it anymore. She could not afford to be a grandmother right now. She could only be what the moment required her to be. "Set course for Earth," she said. Her voice was steady, her eyes were dry. "We have work to do." The fleet turned toward home. Behind them, the beacon continued its broadcast. Humanity will learn its place. The message echoed across empty space, speaking to a dead world that could no longer hear. But Earth heard, and Earth remembered. The footage from New Geneva reached Earth on a Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, 3 billion people had watched it. By Tuesday night, the world had changed forever. Secretary General stood at the window of his office in Geneva, looking out at the city that shared its name with the dead colony. People had gathered in the streets below. They were not rioting. They were not chanting. They were simply standing there, thousands of them, looking up at the sky, waiting. The silence was more frightening than any anger could have been. His advisors had been arguing for hours. Some wanted immediate war. Some wanted diplomatic channels. Some wanted to appeal to the galactic community for justice. Listened to all of them, and he said nothing. He was thinking about his own children, his own. He was thinking about what he would do if someone burned them alive from orbit. The galactic community responded quickly. Ambassadors from the elder races arrived within days, offering their thoughts and prayers. A species that had achieved interstellar travel when humans were still living in caves, suggested that humanity should reflect on what it might have done to provoke the attack. The ancient beings of pure energy recommended patience and understanding. They were an old and proud civilization, they said. Perhaps humanity had expanded too quickly. Perhaps they had given offense without meaning to. Listen to these ambassadors with a polite smile. He thanked them for their concern. Then he ordered his staff to prepare for war. The problem was simple. Humanity could not win a conventional war against the Dominion. The Dominion had thousands of warships. Humanity had hundreds. The Dominion had conquered species before. They had experience. They had resources. They had 8,000 years of military tradition. Humanity had been sailing between stars for only 2 centuries. In a straight fight, they would lose. But humanity had something they did not know about. Something hidden in the deepest vaults of the Terran Defense Ministry. Something that had never been tested because no one had ever been desperate enough to use it. Project Prometheus. Admiral arrived at the ministry 3 days after the news broke. She was escorted through 17 security checkpoints, down into tunnels that existed on no official map. The walls around her were thick enough to survive a nuclear strike. The air smelled of recycled oxygen and old secrets. Doctor was waiting for her in a laboratory at the bottom of the complex. She was a small woman with gray hair and tired eyes. She had spent 30 years working on Project Prometheus, and she had hoped every single day that her work would never be used. "You know why I am here," Admiral said. Doctor nodded. "The stellar collapse inducer, you want to know if it works." "I want to know if it is ready." The doctor was quiet for a moment. Then she led the Admiral to a window overlooking a massive chamber. In the center of the chamber sat a device the size of a small house. It was covered in cables and sensors and equipment that did not recognize. It did not look like a weapon. It looked like a scientific experiment, something you might find in a university. "It works," Doctor said. "We tested it on an uninhabited system 2 years ago, a dying star at the edge of explored space. We made it die faster." She paused. "Much faster." "How fast?" "The collapse took 17 hours. The resulting explosion destroyed everything within the system. Planets, moons, asteroid belts, nothing survived." Admiral looked at the device. She thought about what it meant. Not a bomb that destroyed cities, not a weapon that killed armies. This was something else entirely. This was the death of a solar system, the murder of a star. "Can it be mounted on a ship?" "We have already begun the process. The Dreadnought Requiem is being modified as we speak. It should be ready within 2 weeks." Admiral nodded slowly. 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, humanity would have the power to do something that no species in galactic history had ever done. They would have the power to end worlds not one at a time, but all at once. Every planet, every moon, every living thing that depended on that star for light and warmth. "You understand what this means," Doctor said quietly. "If we use this weapon, we become something different. Something the galaxy has never seen before. They will never trust us again. They will never see us as the peaceful explorers we wanted to be." "They killed 3 million people," Admiral said. "They killed my granddaughter." "I know. I am not saying we should not use it. I am saying we should understand what we are choosing." The two women stood in silence, looking at the device that could kill stars. Outside, the world was holding its breath. Politicians were making speeches. Diplomats were sending messages. Ordinary people were looking up at the sky and wondering if they were safe. Admiral thought about again. She tried not to, but she could not help it. She thought about the last time she had held her, lifting her up to look at the stars through a telescope. Had asked if there were people living on those distant lights. Yes, had told her, people just like us. Families, children, dreams. Now she was going to make one of those lights go dark forever. "Prepare the weapon," she said, "and prepare the fleet." Secretary General made his address to the world that evening. He stood before 100 cameras, and he spoke in a voice that was calm and steady and full of something that sounded almost like sorrow. "We have spent 2 centuries proving we are a species of peace," he said. "Today, we must prove we are also a species that remembers its dead. The Dominion will be given a chance to answer for what they have done. They will be given a chance to choose justice. If they refuse, then they will learn that humanity is not weak. We are simply patient, and our patience has ended." Across human space, the fleets began to gather. Ships that had been scattered across dozens of systems came together, forming the largest armada humanity had ever assembled. At the center of that armada, surrounded by destroyers and cruisers and carriers, the Requiem waited. In her hold, the stellar collapse inducer hummed with quiet power. Admiral stood on the bridge, watching the stars. She was no longer a grandmother. She was no longer the officer who believed in diplomacy and common ground. She was something new now, something harder, something that scared her when she looked in the mirror. She hoped they would surrender. She prayed they would see reason. But deep in her heart, in the place where her grief had burned away everything soft, she knew they would not. They would refuse because they believed humanity was weak. They would refuse because they could not imagine what was coming. And when they refused, she would show them what humanity could become when it had nothing left to lose. The message from Earth traveled across the stars at the speed of light, but it also traveled through faster-than-light communication networks that humanity had built over 2 centuries of exploration. Within hours, every corner of space had received it. Within days, the entire galaxy knew what humanity was demanding. The terms were simple. Earth wanted every officer who had ordered or participated in the attack on New Geneva to be surrendered for trial. Earth wanted payment to every family that had lost someone in the massacre. Earth wanted a public statement from the Dominion admitting that what they had done was wrong. They had 1 month to meet these demands. The High of the received the message in his throne room on Prime. He was an ancient creature, over 400 years old, with silver skin that had darkened to gray over the centuries. He had ruled the Dominion for 200 years. He had crushed rebellions. He had conquered lesser species. He had built an empire that would last forever. He read the human demands, and he laughed. His advisors laughed with him. The idea that these young, foolish creatures would dare to make demands of the Dominion was amusing. Humanity had been traveling between stars for barely 2 centuries. They had been doing it for 8,000 years. Humanity had a few hundred warships. The Dominion had thousands. This was not a threat. This was a joke. They ask us to surrender our officers, the High said. Perhaps we should send them the ashes of their colony instead, as a reminder of what happens to those who forget their place. His court roared with approval. Messages were sent to every world, mocking the human ultimatum. Comedians made jokes about the foolish mammals who thought they could challenge the masters of the galaxy. Military commanders began planning the invasion of human space. They would crush Earth itself, they said. They would burn every human world until the species was reduced to a few scattered survivors, begging for mercy. The High composed his response personally. He wanted the humans to understand exactly how little he feared them. You ask for our officers. Come and take them. You ask for payment. The only payment you will receive is the same lesson we taught your colony. You ask for an admission of wrongdoing. We did nothing wrong. We simply reminded you of the natural order of things. The strong rule. The weak serve. And those who forget this truth are removed from the galaxy. He ended the message with a promise. We will teach you the same lesson we taught New Geneva, and when we are finished, there will be no one left to remember your species ever existed. The message reached Earth on a cold winter morning. Secretary General read it in his office, surrounded by his advisors. No one spoke. There was nothing to say. They had made their choice. Across the galaxy, other species watched with fascination. The elder races had seen conflicts before. They had seen young civilizations rise and fall. They had seen empires crumble and new ones take their place. But there was something different about this situation, something that made the oldest and among them uneasy. The archivists noticed it first. They were an ancient collective of artificial intelligences created by a species that had died out millions of years ago. They observed everything and judged nothing. They simply recorded, and what they recorded now made no sense. Human fleet movements were strange. They were not gathering at the border of space as one would expect for an invasion. They were not positioning themselves to defend human worlds as one would expect for a defensive war. Instead, they were assembling around a single ship, the dreadnought Requiem, and that ship was moving toward Prime. They cannot be planning a direct assault on the, one archivist said to another. It would be suicide. The system is defended by 200 warships and orbital fortresses that have never been breached. Perhaps they are attempting a symbolic gesture, another archivist suggested, a show of courage before their inevitable defeat. Perhaps, the first archivist agreed, but something in its ancient programming felt uncertain. Humanity had always been strange. They were not like other species. They did not behave according to logical patterns. They had a capacity for both kindness and cruelty that seemed to exist in the same moment. They forgave enemies and helped strangers, but they also remembered every wrong done to them. They were impossible to predict. The archivists decided to watch more closely. The human fleet gathered at the edge of space. 300 warships, the largest armada in human history. At the center was the Requiem, a massive dreadnought that had been modified in ways the sensors could not understand. Admiral stood on its bridge, looking at the stars ahead. The month was almost over. They had not surrendered a single officer. They had not paid a single credit. They had not admitted any wrongdoing. Instead, they had spent the month preparing for war. Their fleets were ready. Their armies were mobilized. They expected humanity to come and die against their defenses. They did not know what was coming. Admiral received one final message from Earth. It was from Secretary General himself. It contained no orders, no instructions, no political speeches. It contained only 3 words: do what is necessary. She read the message and deleted it. Then she addressed her crew. In a few hours we will enter the Prime System. They expect us to fight their fleet. They expect a battle they can win. They are wrong. We are not here to fight. We are not here to invade. We are here to deliver a message that the galaxy will never forget. She paused, looking at the faces around her. Some were young, barely out of training. Some were old, veterans of a dozen conflicts. All of them knew what they were about to do. All of them had volunteered. They killed 3 million innocent people because they thought we were weak. Today, we will show them what humanity is capable of when we are pushed too far. What we do today will haunt us forever. It will change what we are in the eyes of the galaxy. There will be no going back. She took a deep breath. But some things cannot be forgiven. Some lessons must be taught in blood and fire. They wanted to teach us our place. Instead, they will learn theirs. All hands prepare for final approach. Today, we kill a star. The fleet moved forward. Behind them, the galaxy watched. And the star of Prime burned on, not knowing that its light had only 17 hours left to shine. The human fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Prime System. 200 warships immediately moved to intercept them. Orbital defense platforms charged their weapons. Ground-based cannons aimed at the sky. The entire system had been prepared for this moment. The High watched from his palace on Prime. He stood at a great window that overlooked the capital city, a vast metropolis of towers and gardens that had stood for 6,000 years. Behind him, his generals and advisors monitored the battle displays. They were confident. They had faced enemies before. They had always won. The humans bring only 300 ships, one general reported. We outnumber them with our home fleet alone. When reinforcements arrive from other systems, we will crush them completely. Let them come closer, the High said. Let them see the might of the Dominion before they die. But the human fleet was not behaving like an invasion force. They were not spreading out into attack formations. They were not launching fighters or preparing boarding parties. Instead, they stayed in a tight formation around a single massive ship, the Requiem. And that ship was not heading toward Prime. It was heading toward the sun. "What are they doing?" an admiral demanded. "They are ignoring our fleet. They are ignoring the planet. Why are they approaching the star?" No one had an answer. The ships opened fire. Energy beams and missiles struck the human formation. Ships exploded. Crews died. But the fleet kept moving forward, absorbing the damage, using their bodies to shield the Requiem. Destroyers sacrificed themselves without hesitation. Cruisers took hits meant for the dreadnought. Human pilots flew into certain death because they knew what was at stake. Admiral watched her fleet die around her. Every explosion was a crew she had trained, officers she had known, young people with families waiting for them at home. She felt each loss like a knife in her heart. But she did not order a retreat. She could not. The mission was more important than any of them. The message had to be delivered. The Requiem took damage. Its shields flickered. Its hull cracked in a dozen places. But it kept moving, protected by the ships that surrounded it, dragging itself toward the burning heart of the system. Finally, after 3 hours of desperate fighting, it reached its destination. The ship was now closer to the sun than any of the planets. The heat was immense. The radiation was deadly. The Requiem's cooling systems were failing, but none of that mattered anymore. "Target locked," the weapons officer reported. "Stellar collapse inducer is ready to fire." Admiral looked at the sun one last time. It was a beautiful star, yellow and warm, the source of life for everything in this system. 47 billion beings depended on its light. Cities and farms and forests and oceans all existed because of its energy. Children were born under its warmth. Old ones died in its gentle glow. She was about to murder it. "Fire," she said. The stellar collapse inducer activated. There was no dramatic beam of light, no explosion, no visible effect. Just a pulse of something that human science barely understood, a manipulation of gravity and quantum forces that told the star it was dying. For a moment nothing happened. The fleet continued to fire. The High continued to watch. The sun continued to shine. Then the sun shivered. It was subtle at first, a slight change in the light, a flicker that might have been imagination, but within minutes it became impossible to ignore. The star was changing. Its surface was moving in ways that made no sense. Solar flares erupted, larger than any recorded in history. The light itself seemed wrong, shifting through colors that hurt to look at. The stopped firing. They were staring at their sun, trying to understand what was happening. Across Prime, billions of beings looked up at the sky. The light was different. Something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. Admiral opened a communication channel. Her message would be broadcast across the entire system, to every ship and every city and every frightened soul looking up at their dying star. "You killed 3.2 million humans who wanted only to farm, to raise children, to live in peace. You called us vermin. You laughed as they died. Now watch your star die. Watch it consume everything you have built. And know that this is what happens when you mistake our kindness for weakness." The High heard the message in his throne room. For the first time in 200 years, he felt fear. "Evacuate," he ordered. "Evacuate everyone now." But it was too late. Faster-than-light travel required distance from gravity wells, and the dying star was creating gravitational chaos throughout the system. Ships that tried to jump were torn apart. Escape pods launched into space, only to be caught in the waves of energy pouring from the collapsing sun. Billions of beings tried to run, but there was nowhere to run to. The collapse took 17 hours. During that time, the people of Prime watched their sun transform from a source of life into an engine of destruction. The temperature rose. The radiation increased. Oceans began to boil. Cities began to burn. And through it all, the human fleet watched from the edge of the system, protected by experimental shielding that had been designed for this moment. No one on the Requiem celebrated. No one cheered. Admiral stood at the, tears running down her face, watching the death of a civilization. Around her, officers wept openly. Some prayed. Some simply stared, unable to process what they had done. In the final hour, the star collapsed into itself, then exploded outward in a wave of light and fire that no living thing could survive. Prime was vaporized. Its 7 moons were destroyed. 3 colony worlds in the outer system were sterilized by radiation. Everything that they had built in this system over 6,000 years was erased in an instant. 47 billion lives ended. The shockwave reached the human fleet, and even through their shielding, they felt its power. The light was so bright that had to shut down to protect the crew. The energy was so immense that sensors overloaded. When visibility returned, there was nothing left. Where a star had burned, there was only a fatting glow of radiation. Where planets had orbited, there was only debris. The Prime system was gone. Admiral sent one message back to Earth: "It is done." Then she left the bridge and went to her quarters. She locked the door. She sat on her bed, and she cried until she had no tears left to give. Around her, the requiem was silent. The crew moved through their duties like ghosts, unable to speak, unable to look each other in the eyes. They had just killed more beings than any weapon in history. They had just committed an act that made every war before this seem small. And the worst part, the part that would haunt them forever, was that it had been necessary. They had left them no choice. The galaxy had to learn that humanity was not prey. The lesson had to be taught in terms that no one could ignore. But knowing something is necessary does not make it easy to live with. As the human fleet turned for home, leaving behind the grave of 47 billion souls, every person aboard carried a weight that would never leave them. They had proven that humanity was not weak, but they had also proven what humanity could become when pushed too far, and they were not sure which truth was more terrible. 1 year had passed since the star died. The Dominion no longer existed. Without their leaders, without the heart of their civilization, the remaining systems had fallen into chaos. Civil wars erupted between factions that had once been united. Colonies that had depended on Prime for resources and guidance found themselves alone. The mighty empire that had ruled for 8,000 years collapsed in months. Humanity did not invade. They did not conquer. They did not claim territory or demand tribute. Instead, they did something that confused the galaxy far more than the destruction of the star. They sent aid. Human ships arrived at refugee stations carrying food, medicine, and supplies. Human doctors treated wounded without asking for payment. Human engineers helped rebuild systems that had been damaged in the chaos. The same species that had killed 47 billion beings was now bandaging the wounds of the survivors. A young named watched a human medic treating her brother. He had been injured in a riot, trampled by crowds trying to escape a dying space station. The medic worked carefully, gently, as if the boy were his own family. When he finished, he smiled at and offered her a ration bar. "Why?" she asked. It was the only word she could manage. The medic paused. He was young, barely older than herself. His eyes were tired but kind. "Because you are hurting," he said simply, "and we know what that feels like." Across the galaxy, the elder races watched in confused silence. They had expected humanity to become conquerors after their victory. They had expected occupation, exploitation, the behavior of every other species that had ever gained such terrible power. Instead, they found humans helping their enemies, mourning alongside them, treating them with dignity even after everything that had happened. The archivists recorded it all, adding it to their endless files. One archivist composed a report that would be studied for centuries to come. Human psychology remains unpredictable. They are capable of destroying stars and weeping for those they kill. They take revenge beyond all proportion and then help the survivors rebuild. They are not rational beings in any sense we understand. They are something else, something we have never encountered before. The galactic community convened an emergency session to discuss what to do about humanity. Proposals were made. Some species wanted to contain them, to build a coalition that would keep humanity from expanding further. Some wanted to declare them a threat to all civilized life. Some wanted to pretend the whole thing had never happened. Every proposal failed, not because of disagreement but because of fear. An ancient diplomat, a being who had lived for 900 years and negotiated with 100 species, spoke the truth that no one else would say. "We have spent thousands of years believing we understood war. We believed it was about territory, resources, pride. We believed there were rules, limits, things that civilized beings simply did not do. Humanity has shown us we were wrong. They do not fight wars the way we fight them. They do not calculate victory the way we calculate it. When they are hurt, they do not seek advantage. They seek vengeance, and their vengeance has no limits." He paused, looking around at the assembled delegates. But that is not what makes them terrifying. What makes them terrifying is that they wept while they did it. They mourn the dead even now. They will never forget what they did, and they will never forgive themselves for doing it. That is not the behavior of a species that enjoyed destruction. That is the behavior of a species that did what it believed was necessary and will carry the guilt forever. So what do we do? Another delegate asked. The ancient diplomat was silent for a long moment. We do nothing. We treat them with respect. We do not threaten them. We do not push them. And we pray that they never have to make that choice again. On Earth, there were no victory parades. The anniversary of New Geneva was marked with silence. 1 minute for every million dead, both human and people gathered in parks and squares, not to celebrate but to remember, to carry the weight of what their species had done. Admiral retired. She refused all interviews and turned down every medal. She bought a small house in Hokkaido in a valley surrounded by mountains, and she planted a garden. Every spring, she grew flowers that reminded her of the meadow where had chased butterflies. She could never quite bring herself to look at them for long. Secretary General stepped down from his position. He spent his remaining years working with refugee communities, helping displaced beings find new homes. He never spoke publicly about the decision he had made. He did not need to. Everyone knew. Monuments were built across human space. They were not monuments to victory. They were monuments to loss, to the weight of power, to the terrible truth that the ability to destroy does not mean the right to destroy, but sometimes there is no other choice. The plans for the stellar collapse inducer were sealed away in a vault beneath the Swiss Alps. 17 layers of encryption protected them. The vault was designed to survive the death of the planet itself. A single note was attached to the file. Pray we never need this again. Pray harder that we never want to. Years passed. The galaxy changed. Humanity continued to grow, but more carefully now. They built colonies with better defenses. They trained soldiers who understood what war really meant. They never forgot New Geneva, and they never forgot Prime. Both tragedies lived in their collective memory, reminders of what could happen when civilizations refused to understand each other. The young who had watched a human medic save her brother grew up. She studied languages and diplomacy. She became an ambassador, working to build bridges between her people and the species that had destroyed her. When journalists asked how she could work with humans, she had a simple answer. They never let themselves forget what they did, she said. They still mourn our dead alongside their own. That is more than my people ever offered theirs. And in a small house in Hokkaido, an old woman sat in her garden as the sun went down. She watched the stars appear one by one, each a distant sun lighting worlds she would never see. She thought about her granddaughter. She thought about the children who had died on Prime. She thought about all the lights in the sky that could be extinguished if someone made the wrong choice. A young neighbor boy came by sometimes to help with her garden. One evening, he asked her about the stars. He wanted to know if there were people living on them, if they were friendly, if humanity would ever meet them. Admiral looked at him for a long time. Then she pulled him close, the way she used to hold, and she pointed at the night sky. There are people out there, she said. Some of them are kind. Some of them are cruel. Some of them have done terrible things, and some of them have had terrible things done to them. We are no different. We have been heroes and we have been monsters, sometimes in the same moment. Which are we really? The boy asked. She smiled, but there was sadness in it. That depends on us. Every day, every choice, we decide what we are. The stars will always be there, watching. What matters is what we choose to do under their light. The boy nodded, not fully understanding, but knowing it was important. Above them, the stars burned on, ancient and indifferent, silent witnesses to everything that lived and died beneath their light. And somewhere in that vast darkness, the space where Prime had once orbited was empty now. A grave of light and silence, a reminder of what happened when two civilizations forgot how to be kind. Humanity had learned its lesson. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Now they could only hope it would be remembered.